thank you guys for giving up your time. It's actually quite a nice day here in Cambridge. Hope it is wherever you are. Can you also put a little message in if you can see a slide saying welcome? That'd be useful. Check. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys. So yeah, I'll just leave kind of a couple of minutes for people to start joining. Because it's the first one, I'm not sure how many I'm going to get, but normally, so this is the second year I've been doing them, and last year the numbers kind of went up quite quickly. But you know, it's sort of the type of thing where at this stage a lot of people aren't going to be thinking about this sort of thing, whereas you guys have the right idea and you're sort of getting prepared early, which is good. So yeah, as you can see on there, the way we're doing sort of the Q&A today is via a program called Slido, which some of you guys may have used before. It's used in kind of medical lectures, so it's good practice for you guys. So if you go into either slido.com or you can see there it's sli.do and use the hashtag 6med, I've got a couple of polls on there for you guys to answer just very quickly to give me a kind of idea as to where you're at. And you can also submit your questions there. And then if you kind of upvote the questions that you want me to answer, then I can kind of see what the whole group wants. Because yeah, normally there are quite a few questions and I can't get through them all. So yeah, there should be like a word cloud poll and then a multiple choice poll. And let me know if you can't see that. And I'll give it maybe another minute or so, and then we can get started. So if there are any questions I don't get around to answering, you can see there I've put the email to kind of contact the team. So that's team@6med.co.uk. And there are lots of people kind of manning the emails there. So it probably won't specifically be me unless they sort of refer the question on to me, but there will be someone who's kind of knows what they're talking about. I'll be able to kind of answer your question. So let me see what's happening on the poll. Okay, so we've started to get a few answers to it. So in terms of kind of one of the things I asked is what kind of stage are you at for the Ucat? And it seems like most people are kind of as expected, sort of at the beginning. And you know, I think it's one of those things where if you ask people in the year above when they started, you'll get people saying, you know, I started 4 weeks before or 2 weeks before. I would probably advise against that, and you know, I'll talk a little bit more about that. But it's something where if you kind of space out the work over time, it's going to be a lot more effective, and will make you feel a lot better as well. So okay, so if you keep voting on the polls, and I will start with the surgery. So welcome, guys. So as I said, this is the kind of second year that I'm doing this. We've revamped things a little bit. We've taken the feedback on, so it's a lot more kind of structured now. So this is going to be an introduction to the Ucat, and then in the next kind of few weeks and months, I'm going to be going through each section in detail, kind of talking about the approaches to it and some example questions. Basically a kind of abridged version of what I've filmed for the masterclasses, which you might have seen on the website. And so in terms of who I am, so I'm currently a 5th year medical student at Cambridge. I'm also the 6med ACE ambassador, so I'm kind of the link between you guys and 6med as a sort of organization. You can see my sort of stats there because I'm always kind of asked about those. So hopefully it's encouraging that, I mean, I had pretty strong kind of academics, but you know, my Ucat wasn't sort of, you know, top tier. It was very good, but and my BMAT as well, if you guys are considering sitting that. I don't know if you're sort of aware of the scoring at your stage yet, but basically anything above kind of 7 is sort of, you know, absolutely amazing. And I didn't sort of get that. I got a, you know, quite a good score, but hopefully that'll be sort of encouraging to you guys. I do have my own kind of projects as well. If you want to go on my very originally named website, I have kind of placement blog, which I think the guys last year found quite useful to sort of get a bit of an insight into what a clinical medical student actually does in Cambridge. But yeah, if you have any kind of questions about my journey, feel free to pop that on Slido. And just a general kind of clarification as well. You can ask questions about anything. It doesn't just have to be about the UCAT. It can be about the BMAT or the interview, the personal statement. It can be about being a medical student in general. Yeah, pretty much anything. So in terms of what we'll kind of do today, so I'll talk a little bit about the UCAT and provide some information. And hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions as well. And then I've got an example question here, and because it's sort of a general overview, I didn't put too many in, but obviously in subsequent surgeries, I'll be putting more kind of example questions for each subsection. So yeah, so let's start with a kind of brief introduction to what the UCAT actually is, which you guys are probably familiar with the basics of it. But let's kind of go through some of the absolute basics. So it's a 2-hour test, and there are 5 sections. It's done kind of on the computer, so usually in like a Pearson VUE center, so where you'd go for your theory test, for example. But obviously with kind of COVID, they did last year have some sort of online setup where you could kind of do it remotely from wherever. And obviously there were some difficulties with the program and the software, shall we say. So yeah, hopefully it will be sort of a little bit more streamlined this time. So the sections themselves, I've tried to include basically a 1-word summary of what each of them are. So verbal reasoning is basically letters. So it's your kind of words. It's your being able to sort of read through paragraphs and extract information. Decision making is all about kind of logic and applying logic to different situations. Quantitative reasoning is about data and numbers. Abstract reasoning is about shapes and patterns, and then SJT is kind of about ethics. And you can see some of the key dates there. The actual dates themselves, you can obviously sort of look up the specifics, but the kind of principle that I wanted to get across was that there's a wide range of tests here, and so you do have quite a lot of sort of flexibility in organizing your time. So you can decide that you want to sit it later on and have more time to study, or you can sit it earlier on and therefore kind of get it out the way. And then if you're doing the BMAT, for example, or if you have kind of schoolwork to do, other projects, then it's one thing to kind of not have to worry about. The official UCAT kind of overlords have sort of advised actually for you to sit it earlier. I think that's in case there are any disruptions. So that's potentially something to kind of bear in mind. But we're sort of I mean, it's the 16th of May right now. I would always kind of encourage a couple of months of preparation. So I think sitting it even in sort of late July would sort of be you can see that the first test date there is kind of 26th of July. So sitting it in that early period is probably advisable. The registration, make sure you make a note of that and put it in your calendar, because I assume students will generally want to book for the earlier slots. So do kind of keep that in mind. And if you're a bursary student, then make sure you apply as well. In terms of the results themselves, so you will get your results straight away. It'll just be printed off and you'll have it. So you'll know what you have. And then according to sort of current instructions, you don't have to do anything. So in the past, so when I did it, I had to kind of manually send it to the universities, but now it will all be done sort of automatically. So yeah, you won't have to sort of worry about that, but you also won't have to wait for your results. So that's pretty good. So in terms of the sections themselves, I've put the kind of questions and timing here just as a sort of a guide, but you may notice that some of them, it seems like there's very little time, and for some of the others, it seems like there's lots of time. That's a little bit misleading, because obviously the questions themselves are going to be structured very differently. So I would actually say, paradoxically, probably the most time-pressured section, and the one that the most students find sort of that has the most time pressure, it's probably the first two. So especially verbal reasoning, because it's a lot of kind of big paragraphs, and then decision making can sometimes be quite difficult if you don't have a sort of systematic way of going about it. But that's hopefully something that we'll be able to sort of talk through in the subsequent surgeries, and also something that I talk about in the master classes, and hopefully you'll be able to gain from the kind of Ninja and whatever kind of platforms you use. And yeah, so here's just a basic summary of these main sections, and also if you kind of are furiously scribbling down all these details, not only are they kind of on the Ucat website, but I have managed to wrangle these slides being available. You just have to fill out like a feedback form at the end, and then we'll send you the slides. So yeah, one thing to check as well is with your universities whether or not they use the SJT. So that's the last section. That's the one where you have various situations where there's some sort of conflict or some sort of difficult situation, and you have to kind of say either what you would do or kind of what's the most appropriate thing to do, what's the least appropriate, and also what's the most and least important thing to do in that scenario. So something like your friend has been missing lectures, and you know that another one of your medical student friends has been signing him in, for example, and it will give you different sort of possible responses to that scenario. And so that's something where you're not given a numerical score, you're given a band 1 to 4, I believe. And most students tend to get sort of band 2, I believe. And getting band 1 is obviously kind of the aim, but I think you can even get kind of band 2 or 3, and that'll be okay. But the key point is some universities that use the Ucat don't actually take the SJT into account. So make sure you're very clear with the universities to which you're applying. So I've got an example question here for quantitative reasoning. This is a fairly basic question, but I wanted to demonstrate some of the key principles of this particular section. So I've got the kind of breakdown of what it is here. And I mean, I'll kind of give, sort of 30 seconds or so. You'll obviously get more time than that in the exam, but if you guys just want to have a go at this, and you can either put the answer in the chat or you can just make a note of it, and then I'll kind of say what the answer is. But I will be quiet now so you can read it. I should also clarify, you can obviously use a calculator because there will be one in the exam, but the kind of overwhelming instructions are to not rely on it because it's not particularly kind of user-friendly, and it's much faster to be able to approximate these things. But I already have an answer that's been, if you don't want to kind of put it publicly, you can send me a DM via the chat function as well. Okay, so getting some answers. I think we'll wait for one more, and then okay, awesome. So most of you have put the correct answer, which is great, and you can see that, I mean, this is obviously a slightly easier form. You'd probably have more data and you'd have to select a bit of data. But the key point is, imagine you're, partway through the exam, this question comes up. It's very easy to get sort of, confused with what's going on. And so the first thing to do is to make sure you're very clear as to what the aim is. And so what we're essentially doing here is we're converting from pounds to dollars. And so, you want some sort of either write down on your whiteboard or some sort of mental note. You're going from 0.69 to 1, and you're going from 4570 to X, or the answer. And so that should automatically tell you the answer is going to be bigger than 4570. And so you can actually eliminate the first two answers. And this is the sort of one of the key principles of the Ucat as a whole, which is trying to eliminate answers that are obviously incorrect, because what you then have is a 1 in 3 chance. And so if you've kind of flagged this question and you've come back to it and you're running out of time, that would be a case where now your chances of getting it right are 33% instead of 20%. So that's one of the key principles. Most of you put the correct answer. So this is kind of how I would go through it. So keep it really clear in your head what the aim of the question is. Try and boil it down to one kind of word or kind of numerical sentence, one sort of equation. So we need to work out kind of the percentage change here, and so we want to go from 0.69 to 1, which is roughly sort of 70%. And so we want to work out if 4570 represents 70% of the amount in dollars, we need to get to 100%. So, we can just divide by 7, and that will get us to 10%, and then times by 10. So if we kind of approximate it, and then we kind of work out that we get an answer of around 650, and then we can get times that by 10 and get to 6,500, and the closest to that is C. And so that would be a way of doing it very quickly without the calculator, and also making sure that you've eliminated 2 of the possibilities. If you didn't get it right, then it's important to kind of learn from it and try and work out why you didn't get it right. If you did, then that's fantastic, and you'll sort of see with quantitative reasoning, the questions are in multiple different formats, and so it's really important that even if your mental maths is quite good, you're getting used to the different formats, because it can potentially catch you out. But yeah, well done to everyone who answered. So some of the kind of key mistakes I wanted to summarize when approaching the Ucat. So, essentially, I mean, it scored 300 to 900 for each section, and everyone obviously wants to get as close to 900 as possible. What you'll find is that when you first start doing questions, you'll have a kind of base level, which may be as low as kind of 300 or 400. You may start off around sort of 700, but regardless, when you first start off, your score is going to be much, much lower. And even after just a few weeks of preparation, you can really improve your score as long as you don't fall into these mistakes. So the first one is time. So firstly, starting early. So it's good that you guys have attended this, because you're getting some kind of early information, you're getting familiar with the format, and starting to think about these key ideas. And also time in terms of practicing under timed conditions. So you want to make sure you are actually doing whole sections under timed condition. And then eventually, as you get closer, doing kind of 2 or 3 sections, and then entire mock tests, because you not only have the individual time limits of each section, but also there's the kind of added fatigue. So once you're halfway through, you've done an hour of just question after question, focusing really hard, utilizing different skills, maybe a bit of kind of stress and nerves and worries creeping in there if there are a few questions that you were unsure of. So it becomes really mentally fatiguing, and it's good to actually practice that. The second thing is digging deeper. So it's very easy just to bash out the questions and kind of either get them right, sometimes by luck, most of the time from working it out, but also you'll come across questions and you'll keep coming across them, and you'll keep getting them wrong, because you'll never kind of sit down and work out what's the actual approach to this. And this is why some of the sections, especially things like abstract reasoning, and even things like quantitative reasoning, some students really struggle with, because they don't have a set process. They don't have a kind of practiced algorithm to go through each of these kind of sections, and also the kind of sub questions that are involved in these. And this is something that I've talked about in the masterclasses, and I will talk about in these surgeries as well. And then finally, exam technique. So there are a few things, some of which I tried to kind of show in that question. So things like, rounding and approximating, being able to kind of discard answers that are obviously wrong, skimming paragraphs and looking for keywords, flagging and skipping, which is basically where you kind of make a guess, flag up a question so that you know to come back to it at the end, and then skip on to the next one. And also, because you're all, very intelligent, very high achieving people, you're used to getting the correct answer. So if you're spending a minute on a question and you still haven't got there, it's really frustrating, and you don't want to give it up. But you do have to think that for every hard question, there are going to be plenty of easy ones kind of down the line. So it makes a lot more sense to kind of flag it, put whatever answer you think is kind of the closest, hopefully try and discard some answers, and then just move on to the next questions, because ultimately you need to get through all of the questions in order to have the best possible chance of getting a competitive score. So we're going to go on to the Q&A. So as I said before, if you could submit your questions on Slido and upvote the ones you want to be answered. I'm just going to start my little timer there. And yeah, as I said, the questions can be about absolutely anything. So we've got a couple of questions on there. So someone said, for what reason would a university want or not want the SJT section? So essentially, I think it's because firstly, it's the newest section. So it was introduced, I think, only a few years ago. So they may be thinking it's not the most kind of reflective and representative kind of metric of student ability. And also because it's quite different to the others. It's very different in terms of the way the questions are asked and what they're actually testing. So some universities are, I think, a bit apprehensive to include it. So yeah, it's a decision which I think they will start to kind of reverse as time goes on and it becomes more embedded in the sort of Ucat. So yeah, that's probably why. Got some. I've got some questions in the chat. If you guys could, if you're able to go onto Slido, that would be better, because then I can see kind of how many people are voting the questions up. If you can't, then let me know, but I'll have to sort of try and navigate the two. And yeah, and please do kind of upvote the questions that you see that you want me to answer. Okay, so would it be a good approach to the Ucat to learn the technique first, then apply it to every question, then learn why you went wrong? Yeah, I think that's very sensible. So I think going about things in a systematic way is the best way to do things in general when it comes to medicine. Obviously, that means you'll need more time. So it's not an approach that you could do if you start kind of 2 weeks earlier. And so if you sort of if you kind of approach each section and then break down these specific types of questions that are in each section, because each one will have kind of between sort of 2 and 6 main question types, and then if you can actually sort of develop a way, a process, some sort of algorithm where you kind of go through your approach for each one, whatever the most efficient way is, and kind of practice that and see what works for you, then that's ultimately what's going to lead to you being able to answer a wide range of questions and also be able to do it in sort of really good time. So yeah, I think that would be a very good approach. And you can either do it alongside kind of the webinars, or you can look up whatever resources you want. If you have a bit of money, you can look at the masterclasses that I filmed. It's completely up to you. So yes, I think that would be a very sensible approach. I'm a year 12 student and have started a medical society at school. Any ideas for topics or activities we could do each session? First of all, that's really awesome. That's a great thing for you to put in your personal statement. It's a really good thing for your own kind of personal development. It's good kind of general transferable skills. So good stuff there. I think something that would not only enhance all of your kind of applications, but also help to extend your interests. So you could do things like discussing common kind of medical ethics debates. You could each pick a topic and kind of present it. You could maybe try and get in some speakers. I'm sure there'll be kind of people on social media, and there are always kind of doctors and things who would be very happy, especially if there are some kind of in the local area kind of GPs and stuff. So it would almost kind of count as some work experience as well if you can kind of have a talk and be able to do it, some sort of Q&A with a doctor or someone in the NHS. So I think all of those things would be good, as long as it's something that kind of extends your interests and ideally can add some depth to your kind of application as well. Then I think that would be really good. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else, because my school didn't have a medical society. So yeah, maybe like if you could do like sort of essay competitions as well, and get your sort of UCAS coordinator or like a biology teacher or a chemistry teacher to kind of judge it, then that would technically count as a sort of prize, and whoever wins can say, I won my school's medical society essay competition. So yeah, that sort of stuff, I think. So I hope that was useful. There are quite a few questions with 2 votes. If someone can be a tiebreaker and yeah, can help me out with that one, that would be good. Okay, someone asked, how did I get? Oh, okay, hang on. Now we've got 2 on 3. I'll answer the first one I saw. How did I get 3 A stars at A level? So to be honest, A level wasn't that difficult for me. Yeah, medical school, that's something else. But yeah, A level was, I think, because I was quite interested in my subjects. So I did biology, chemistry, and maths. Biology and chemistry, especially, I was really interested in. So doing stuff like reading around the syllabus was just kind of part of something I every so often, if I wasn't kind of playing football at lunchtime or whatever, I would just kind of go to the library and do some reading. And I made sure that I kind of went over the topics I was less keen on, or the ones I wasn't as kind of good at. So I think in chemistry, things like sort of organic chemistry, a lot of it was sort of rote memorization, which I don't really like, but I made sure to actually do it. And then make sure you're kind of in contact with your teachers and have a good relationship with them, because if you have high aspirations of doing medicine, potentially at an Oxbridge or a London university, but even if you're just doing medicine, you need to achieve quite highly, and if they're aware of that, then they'll hopefully kind of help you and give you kind of extra support and that sort of thing. So yeah, I would say that. So yeah, but yeah, I know that's not the sort of most useful answer, but I think just making sure you're getting the kind of basics right. So how do you collect work experience in the pandemic and show your dedication to medicine in the personal statement? Really good question. So obviously it is difficult. And so the first thing to say is that universities will be aware that, it's been very difficult for students to get work experience. There are online work experiences. So I think the Royal College of GPs and might be Brighton and Sussex Medical School, they do online work experience programs. The other thing I would suggest is if you can contact kind of healthcare workers, either at your local GP or your local hospitals, and see if they do any sort of online scheme, that would be good. And if there are any kind of unofficial online schemes as well. So if you kind of know, if you have a family friend who's a doctor, or even if you just want to go to your GP practice and ask to speak to one of the lead GP or a GP partner, or even the practice manager, and just say, I'd like to kind of set up maybe like, a couple of sort of Zoom calls and have some sort of discussion and, talk about kind of what it's like to be a doctor and all of these sorts of things, which is ultimately the point of work experience. Is not about getting an arbitrary number of hours in a hospital or a GP practice. It's about actually learning from it. And so you don't actually need that much time. And if you've actually taken the initiative to go and ask for these opportunities, that's actually, that's really kind of demonstrating an actual interest and passion for the subject. And normally these kind of GPs and nurses and pharmacists, they'll be very happy to help if they have the time. And so you can basically ask them all the questions you want to and gain a better insight into the profession. And then general things like if there's any volunteering that's going on, and things that aren't necessarily related to medicine but are still kind of representative of transferable skills like communication and teamwork, then you can hopefully do some of that. So yeah, and then in terms of dedication to medicine, there's always plenty of things you can do in terms of kind of extending your reading, doing things like essay competitions. If anyone wants to submit to my blog, if you're interested in writing and you want to write about something medical, feel free to message me. There isn't really any kind of pressure, and it's not a huge platform, but if it will help you guys, then do let me know. But yeah, I hope that is a useful answer to that, because that was quite a popular question. Okay, so we have 5 minutes, so still plenty of time. Let me just see what's on the chat. Sorry, someone said the code or link for Slido. Oh yeah, no, thank you, Ella, for responding. And then, is it better to take either the BMAT or the Ucat, or should you take both? As you'd probably predict, my answer to that is going to be it depends. It very much depends on you. So I obviously took both, and I did sort of 2 BMAT and 2 Ucat universities. My kind of reasoning behind that was that I felt like the BMAT conceptually was harder, but the Ucat was a very different format to what I was used to. And so I kind of had strengths and weaknesses in both. So I didn't feel like I could really dominate one. And so, I thought the best approach would be to kind of do both. And I did mine, I think I did my Ucat a bit earlier and then had kind of a few weeks of just BMAT, but I kind of did them alongside each other. Which, if you're good at sort of time management and you feel like you have enough time to kind of dedicate to that, and if you start kind of preparing now, then that's very achievable. You guys are studying 3 or 4 subjects at a time alongside all of your other commitments, so you're definitely capable of it. I think it would just depend on firstly what you actually think about each of the exams. So make sure to kind of get the basics of it, understand what's actually involved in it, take a look at some papers. Remember that you probably won't be able to answer many of the questions at this stage, but that's not the important thing to assess. It's more to assess whether the kind of format of the exam is something that plays to your strengths. And then also think about your universities. So where are you thinking of applying, and do they use the BMAT or the Ucat? How do they use them? What's the kind of weighting on them? And then think about what sort of time you can spare. Do you have other time commitments? Do you have lots of things coming up? Do you have lots of projects, or do you have plenty of time to dedicate to both of them? And once you kind of answer those 3 questions, you should hopefully be able to come to a sensible decision on whether you should do one or the other or both. So yeah, there's no kind of better or worse with that, because one student who's very good at time management and has lots of time might do pretty well in both. One student might be really good at the Ucat with the sort of time pressure, might not be that good at the BMAT. If you're someone who prefers writing, then the BMAT's quite good because of the essay. If you're someone who's better with kind of your hardcore, difficult kind of science and maths and physics, then the BMAT's probably something to kind of consider. So yeah, that's what I would probably say on that. Okay, so a question about books. I'm glad this came up, because this is definitely one of the most frequently asked questions. And so I would always suggest don't go for the classic books that everyone will be saying. So you've probably heard about lots of them, like stuff by Athol Gawande and The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, and all of these sorts of things. I would actually say that's probably not a good idea, because ultimately the reason for actually reading these books is to extend your interests and to show that you want to kind of learn beyond just the scope of the curriculum. So I would say that the process should be, think about a topic that you're interested in, if you're sort of stuck on what your interest is, if I were to ask you right now, I want you to write a 2-page essay on something related to medicine, what would you pick? And once you start to think about the answer to that question, you'll start to kind of appreciate, okay, I would probably go for something along kind of medical ethics, or I would probably go for something alongside kind of public health, or something alongside kind of cardiovascular disease, all of these kind of topics. And once you know what you're interested in, then do some research on what kind of books are available. See what's in your school's library, see what's available online, and whatever sounds like it could be quite interesting to read, see if you can get kind of like an online preview of it and flick through it, and then read that, and make sure it's something that is somewhat based in kind of fact, and is something you can sort of reflect from. So yeah, so I read, I think. I didn't have this advice, so I did read one kind of classic book, which was, I think, The Emperor of All Maladies, which was actually, I didn't enjoy that much, but I thought I kind of had to read it because it was one of the books everyone recommended. I also read Bad Science by Ben Goldacre, but I read that because I was personally interested in that, so that was really good. And I read a book on MRSA because that was related to my EPQ, so that was also very good. So yeah, I think I read those, and then kind of general, sort of biology and chemistry related things, and some, new scientists, that sort of stuff. So yes, that's that. So the time has just gone. There will be another Q&A very shortly, by the way. So please feel free to keep submitting questions and keep sort of upvoting as well. But we're just going to take a quick break now to talk about, if I'm able to go onto my screen. There we go. Okay. So you should hopefully see the slide talking about 6med resources. So I'm going to talk very briefly about this. I'm not here to kind of sell anything to you, but I just wanted you guys to be aware, because a lot of kind of students last year sort of said that they only heard about some of these resources for the first time during the surgeries, and they found them quite useful. So I've just done a quick kind of summary of some of the free resources we have, and then if you have some money, some of the kind of cheaper ones, and then some of the more kind of slightly higher price but more sort of higher value investment type things. And the image I have there is just a screenshot of the website where it kind of summarizes everything in the Ucat bundle, which is where you kind of get everything put into it. But I thought that was good because I can talk about each of them individually. So in terms of free stuff, there's plenty of kind of blog information. The most kind of up-to-date stuff will be some of the stuff that I've written. So if you kind of type in 6med Hardy Blote, and then click onto my author bio, you'll be able to see the stuff I wrote. I did a kind of series on the personal statement, which should hopefully be useful to you guys. These surgeries are free as far as I know, so feel free to come along to the next one. And then we're kind of increasing the social media awareness. So there's a new WhatsApp group for this year's cohort. We had multiple last year, which I think worked really well. And I'm kind of in the groups and interacting, so you can kind of ask me questions via WhatsApp as well. There's also going to be some Discord activities. So if you're on Discord, it's basically like, I think it's like Zoom mixed with Slack, from what I understand. And yeah, apparently there are some very exciting ideas in development for that. And then the sort of main pages, so the Facebook, Instagram, etc., where we'll be announcing things. And then if you have a bit of money, the Ucat Ninja is like the question bank that most people use. And then things like the books and the masterclasses, which are the videos that I recorded, which I did on the Ucat, the BMAT, personal statement, and the interview. And spent a ridiculous amount of time talking. So yes, please do check out even just the previews. And then if you have a bit more money, there's sort of courses and tuition and the sort of full bundles. So yeah, that's just a very brief kind of thing to make you aware of things. But obviously, there's no pressure for any of these. If you are a bursary student, then we do bursaries. So make sure to sort of apply for that. But yeah, any questions about any of these as well, just let me know. Okay, so now back to Q&A. I told you that'd be short. Someone has said, is there a dentistry WhatsApp group? I don't think so, mainly because we just don't have enough dentistry applicants. So yeah, I do apologize for that. But yes, I also do have some links for you guys that I need to remember, which I will now post in the chat. So here we go. And then I'll get back to the questions. Here we go. Okay, so I've got a link to my website blog if you guys want to look at that. And then if you find it in any way useful, you can sign up to subscribe. I have a link to the 6med Ucat page if you want to check out the resources. And I have a link to the feedback form. So if you guys want the slides and the information from this surgery, then if you can fill out that feedback form, super useful for me. I got really useful feedback last year, and it ultimately helps you guys as well as me. So and it's pretty short. I get loads of feedback forms as a med student, so I try to make it as short as possible. Okay, back to the Q&A. If you guys can, again, keep submitting your questions. We have kind of, 15 minutes, made actually pretty good time. So yeah, we have kind of 15 minutes to kind of answer the questions. Again, if you're able to, if you could get onto Slido and use #6med, I have to kind of prioritize those over the chat questions because I can see how many people have upvoted them. Then that would be good. And if I don't manage to get around to your question, remember to email team@6med.co.uk. Okay, if I start revision for Ucat in June, when do you recommend booking the Ucat in order to get enough preparation? So I would always say you should aim for at least 4 weeks preparation. If you're starting completely from scratch, so you mean this is basically everything you know about the Ucat from today. Then I would say if you're starting revision at the beginning of June, then you should maybe aim for kind of early August, I think would be kind of the earliest, I would say. It's quite difficult because if we go back to the dates, which I know I've exited, so you guys can't see, but so the test dates are 26th of July to the 29th of September. So if you're starting in June, then, if you give yourself kind of from June until the test dates start, then you'll have, sort of 6 to 7 weeks, which I think is a decent amount of time if you're kind of spreading things out. So yeah, I would say kind of, as soon as possible in the kind of application window, especially if you're thinking of doing the BMAT as well. If you don't mind kind of spending more time and taking it more slowly and maybe doing it alongside your BMAT revision as well, then by all means go a little bit later and give yourself more kind of breathing room. So yeah, I would probably say that. Someone has asked where you submit the questions. Let me just type it out for you. So you go to slido.com or just type in Slido, and then it'll ask you for like a hashtag code, and it's just #6med. Okay. So the next one is, which work experiences was I able to get? Okay, so this was obviously, quite a few years ago. So I managed to get some pretty decent work experience. And so I got my local hospital. So I'm from Leicester. My local hospitals were doing like a sort of scheme where they'd take on, a few hundred students and kind of spread them out between the 3 main hospitals. So I did, I think it was maybe a week or 2 weeks in the hospital. I also got pretty lucky. So I went to my GP, and this is why I say for you to kind of take the initiative, because otherwise this never would have happened. So I went to my GP and I asked them if they kind of do anything, any sort of work experience, any GPs I could talk to, and they actually were launching a kind of initiative where they were looking for a kind of student to work essentially as a sort of apprentice at the GP practice in the sort of admin team. So I applied, and there were a lot of applicants, but I think luckily, uh, because they sort of interviewed, and my interview kind of style generally is pretty decent, I think. So I was able to kind of get that. So I worked there for sort of 18 months, which was obviously pretty amazing because I was in the GP environment for that long. It was great for developing lots of skills, especially talking to disgruntled and angry and upset patients. And I started work there when I was 16, so it was really good for kind of general maturity as well. Um, but obviously that's quite rare. That's not something that the most students have. Um, but the actual time itself is quite arbitrary. I think the value is the most important thing. So if I didn't speak to any GPs at all and kind of shied away from learning opportunities, I wouldn't have really gained too much from it compared to someone who maybe had a couple of in-depth conversations with a GP. So yeah, but I didn't do any kind of D of E. I didn't do any volunteering. So there was plenty that I kind of didn't do as well. And so the aim is, when you kind of talk in your personal statement about your work experience, make sure you emphasize the actual value to it, and sort of learning opportunities that you took from it. Okay, I've got a few that have kind of 3 upvotes. If you guys can sort of again try and be a tiebreaker for me. And if you do need to leave now, by the way, just kind of, we have sort of 10 minutes left, but please do fill out the feedback form that I linked in the chat, because I'll send the slides to all of the emails I get. So I won't be able to send it to you without your email. And also it'll be super useful for the next surgery, which will be in, I think, 2 weeks' time. So yeah, someone said hardest thing about being a Cambridge med student. I think for me personally, because I've come from quite a sort of normal, diverse background. So, I went to a normal sixth form, not a particularly high kind of Oxbridge sort of outflow. I was told not to apply to Oxbridge, and, it was kind of 50% ethnic minorities at my school. Coming from that environment to, what is, quite a significant sort of Caucasian demographic, and also quite a lot of sort of privately educated students, it can be difficult to sort of adjust to that environment, and you can feel very sort of out of place, and definitely get a lot of imposter syndrome, especially because Cambridge itself is very much geared towards academics, and I always thought I was less interested in sort of the pure research aspect and more interested in the people aspect, and so it has always felt like a little bit disjointed, and like I'm not quite aligned with the sort of typical Cambridge student. But over my time here, I've sort of seen changes in many regards. More state school students coming in. There's more diversity. There's more kind of general support for these sorts of things. So I'd say probably that. I wouldn't dissuade anyone to apply if they were from a similar kind of background to me. I'd just say be very aware, and maybe read up on some kind of experiences, not only from me but from other people as well, because there's plenty of people who talk about this kind of stuff on social media. So yeah. Okay. Someone's asked how different is a UCAT from the BMAT? Very different. Very, very different. The BMAT is it's sort of like, it takes your kind of GCSE and also kind of A-level knowledge as well, and it kind of extends it. And also just the general format and vibe of it is very kind of, it's very Oxbridge, in that things are worded in a bit of an annoying way, so that it's almost like a double question, where you have the question itself and also knowing how to actually negotiate the way they structure the questions. And obviously the BMAT is 3 sections, and you have, the first one is basically problem solving and all sorts of kind of logic skills. The second section is kind of your maths, biology, chemistry, physics, and then your third section is the essay. The UCAT, on the other hand, is much more kind of time pressure. It's a lot more getting used to kind of, pattern recognition and getting all of these kind of algorithms in second nature, and making sure you're sticking to the time limit. And so the UCAT, I would say, is more practice. The BMAT is more revision. I think that's probably not too sort of incorrect to say. And obviously there's differences in terms of what specific skills you'll need for each of them. There are some overlaps as well, but for example, you won't need your kind of GCSE physics for the Ucat exam really, but you'll need certain other skills, and especially for things like the SJT. So yeah, they are quite different. Okay, quite a lot of sort of three upvote questions. Again, if someone can be a tiebreaker for those, please. Otherwise, I'll just go by kind of chronological order. Okay, what is the Cambridge selection process? Waiting on GCSEs, BMAT, etc. So the Cambridge selection process is, I personally think it's a lot better than the Oxford one. The way they do things is they will generally take your application as a whole. So they take everything into consideration. So if you're someone who doesn't have the best GCSEs, or your BMAT isn't that strong, or you don't have much to put on your personal statement, or if sort of different aspects of your application are weaker, I would apply to Cambridge over Oxford if you're thinking about Oxbridge, because they will then kind of take everything into account, and then they will invite the majority of applicants to interview. So it's like sort of 70 to 80% of applicants will get an invitation to interview. And then obviously at interview, you then have, quite a small sort of chance of getting an offer. So I think it's something like, I think for Peterhouse, which is the college I applied to, it was something like a 1 in 7 chance. So that's what, like 14%. So that sort of makes sense. So that essentially means, if they take 70% out and then kind of 14% of people have an offer, then that's, kind of like a much smaller chance compared to somewhere like Oxford, where they'll offer kind of 30-ish% of applicants an interview, and therefore if you get to interview, you have a much higher chance of getting an offer, but obviously you have a low chance of getting an interview in the first place. So yeah, so I had colleagues who did really badly at GCSEs. I had some who did amazingly across the board. I had some who didn't get much support in terms of kind of personal statements and that sort of thing. People with a range of BMATs, even getting kind of 5s and things. So yeah, I would say the Cambridge process is much more sort of holistic, and they'll take weaker aspects of the application into account. They'll take things into account like the school you came from and the area you came from and that sort of thing. And Oxford, I'm sure they say they do as well, and they probably do, but I don't know. I personally think Cambridge's selection process seems a lot fairer. So yeah. Okay. So again, there are quite a few kind of three liked questions. So let me just, so medicine related EPQ topics. Anything that is a personal interest of yours that you could talk about at interview. So pick something that isn't too specialized. So mine was relatively kind of broad in that it was just on MRSA and how it's controlled in hospitals. And so obviously that opens up discussions on kind of antibiotic resistance and kind of microbiology, a little bit of kind of public health. So it kind of crosses a lot of different areas. But honestly, the reason why I picked that was because at the time I really liked infectious diseases and pathology and immunology, and I just wanted to kind of do something on that. And MRSA was a big topic at the time, so I thought it'd be interesting to kind of see exactly how hospitals were kind of dealing with it. So yeah, I would say pick something you're interested in, and then try and see if there are any kind of specific aspects of that maybe in recent times have been put under the spotlight a bit, so that that there's plenty of information out there, and make sure you kind of talk to your whoever kind of leads your EPQ about whether the scope of it is too wide or too narrow. But yeah, the potential topics are absolutely immense, so it has to kind of be guided by what you're into. Okay, so I think I'll do one more question. So I'll wait a little bit of time to see if we get a question rising to the top. Oh, we've got a question on question banks. Okay, so I think the two that I use the most, I don't have any stats on this, but I think the two that I use the most are ours, the BMAT and Ucat Ninjas, and then Medify's. I think Medify's probably has more questions. Ours, I think, has a pretty realistic sort of difficulty level from what I'm kind of told. So in terms of the actual difficulty level itself, I think both will be good, but I know that that's a specific thing that students say about ours. And then Medify has, more questions. So kind of, if you have the money, obviously both would be ideal. But if you don't have the money, then, it's whether or not you want kind of, a kind of larger question bank, bearing in mind that even though 6Med's question bank I think is smaller, most students don't actually go through every question because there are a lot, and you do underestimate how long it takes to go through all of these questions. So I would say kind of pick between 6Med and Medify. I don't have any ties to Medify, by the way. But yeah, and then if you see any others that you kind of like the look of, then feel free to go for them. Sorry, it's just my timer. I wouldn't recommend the book, the like 1250 questions or whatever it's called. That was pretty much the only resource that was out when I did it, and it hasn't really been updated since then. So I think the format isn't great, and also because it's an online exam, doing like a book format isn't ideal as well. So the 6Med Ninja platform and I think the Medify platform are both pretty similar to the actual software that was used. So yeah, I would say between those. And I think I will end. Oh, there is a question with 6. Okay, that one seems popular, so I will answer that one. So why did I choose Cambridge over all the other unis? So Cambridge was my top choice. I wasn't expecting to get it, and that's an honest answer. I felt pretty confident in having a competitive chance of Leicester and King's, and then I also applied to UCL and Cambridge. I didn't think I'd get into either. But I think because both Cambridge and UCL put quite a lot of emphasis on the interview, I think that's why I did better. But in terms of why I actually picked it, so my school had quite a lot of kind of trips to Cambridge, not really many to Oxford. I'm not really sure why, but that basically meant I was kind of introduced to Cambridge as an idea a bit earlier on and got to kind of know the area a bit more. So I was always kind of more leaning towards Cambridge anyway. I spoke to a few teachers about whether I should apply to Oxbridge at all, and one of my very kind teachers told me that I definitely should, because my kind of grades would be good enough to get an interview, and then because of my kind of persona, I guess I'd have a decent chance at interview. So that kind of sold me on applying to Oxbridge in general. And then because Cambridge, I kind of knew it a bit more. I knew that they interviewed more people. That's why I picked Cambridge over Oxford. I picked UCL over Imperial because Imperial just seemed a bit more geared towards sort of academics, and UCL seemed just a little bit more kind of relaxed. Again, it was probably just kind of stereotypes, because at the time there weren't very many resources around for actual concrete information. But that's why I picked UCL. And then when I got all my offers, if you kind of have Cambridge as an offer, you tend not to turn it down. So that's kind of how that stuff worked for me. So yes, that is going to be the end of the surgery. So again, just a quick sort of note to say, if you can fill out the feedback form that I have linked. If you want the slides, then that's how you get them, because I've just linked it again. The next one, as I said, will be in, I think, 2 weeks today. And I think it will be on probably the first section. So I think it'll be quantitative reasoning. So yeah, if you could sort of come by, I'll talk through the sort of different topics that are the sort of subtopics of it, go through some example questions. Again, we'll do sort of general questions, so anything related to the application. And yeah, thank you for sort of giving up your time, and I hope you found this useful.